My guests today are filmmaker Mark Shapiro and former military veteran Dave Crete. Now, Mark Shapiro is a filmmaker, producer, and movie marketing professional with broad experience in the festival, the distribution, and film production environment. He formerly headed entertainment brand management for the animation studio Laika, where he handled marketing endeavors for Laika's 5 Oscar-nominated features, Coraline and Paranorman, and The Box Trolls, as well as Kubo and the Two Strings, and Missing Link. And we also have Dave Crete, who served in the U.S. Air Force from 1983 to 89. And for most of that time, he served as a security policeman at a classified location within the Nevada Test and Training Range, protecting such programs as the F-117A stealth fighter and the Red Eagles, an Air Force unit flying Russian MiG fighters. They are here today to talk about The Invisible Enemy, a documentary short film by Douglas Brian Miller and Mark Shapiro, which exposes the dangers of radiation and chemical fallout, the denials, the injustice, and the tragic consequences endured by the men and women who served at the Nevada Test and Training Range. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome filmmaker Mark Shapiro and former military veteran Dave Crete to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You're
Thank
very
you for
welcome.
having us.
Well, Dave, let me start with you. So, what is the Nevada Test and Training Range, and how long did you work there?
So, the Nevada Test and Training Range is an area about the size of Rhode Island that starts just north of Las Vegas and extends to a town called Tonopah, which is about 200 miles northwest of Las Vegas. And I served out there I signed in December of 83 and I left late summer of 87. So nearly 4 years.
So why is the work classified as top secret there?
Because when we went there, there was no such thing as a stealth fighter, which we quickly found out to be not true. This area, NTTR, is an area where the government gets to do what it wants to do, if you will, developing weapon systems out of sight of people and cameras and planes and things so that they can maintain the secrecy of the weapons, the next generation of weapons. And that's the duties that we really performed. Was we aided in that and made, like in our case with the stealth fighter, we made it an operational aircraft.
So is this area kind of similar to Area 51?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's that people like to call places like where we work that. So it's not nearly as cool as the myths that are out there about what takes place, which I think the government probably enjoys, keeps people a little bit distracted, and there's always an expert telling you what they've seen, and they clearly never worked there. But yeah, it's that type of classified location.
Well, let me ask you this, and before I get to Mark, because how did you learn that the others who had worked at the NTTR also were dealing with health issues?
It really starts with a beer and a barbecue. We through Facebook, those of us that worked up there that were cops, we were finding one another, and we started having reunions. And I was involved in the second reunion, and it was actually held at my house in Las Vegas. And we were sitting in the backyard. The afternoon of the first event was dinner at my house that night, and some of the folks showed up early, and we were sitting in the backyard. There was a total of 8 of us, including myself. And one of the guys asked the simple question, does anybody else have tumors? And I did. I have 20 to 30 tumors, and one of which I had surgically removed from my back because it was the size of a grapefruit. And as you can imagine, it gets a little bit uncomfortable. Not like a sharp pain, but I mean, it was truly uncomfortable. And it was time to do something about it. And so I went to the surgeon, and they ultimately removed it. And the first coincidence was the guy that asked the question had one in the exact same spot, looked the exact same way as mine did, which is like somebody shoved a hard-boiled egg under your skin. And within a few seconds of everybody talking, we find out that 6 out of 8 of us had tumors, which, okay, that seems odd. And then a seventh guy says, I don't have any, but my son was born with tumors. And then, which then connected, because I have a son that was born with a tumor issue called neurofibromatosis. So all the dots started to connect right there. And then as time went on and as I started researching it and having more conversations with people, we found out that all of us, for the most part, had something. And some things the same and some things different. But the consistency was the rate of occurrence of something that was significant was very, very high, far higher than anybody else, any other conversation I'd ever had with anybody. So that triggered the research. But it was a beer and barbecue in my backyard that struck the original conversation.
Well, Mark, let me ask you, how did you meet Dave Crete, and why did you want to tell the stories of those who have suffered with numerous and various health conditions because they were working or had worked at the NTTR?
Well, we shot a lot of our film in Nevada and around Las Vegas, and we had a screening of Downwind, our film, our documentary film that was an Oscar qualifying doc from 2023, with narrated by Martin Sheen, with Michael Douglas and Lewis Black. So Dave came to see a screening of Downwind in Las Vegas, and during the Q&A, he mentioned what had been going on at the NTTR as it related to military personnel. And as we got closer and closer to the story, and again, I grew up in an area that I grew up in an area in a place where my parents wanted us to always tell truths and and push back when there was injustice. And we met with Dave, kind of dived deeper into the issue, and decided that we had to make this short film. And it's obviously very related to Downwind, our feature doc. And we again, after a series of meetings, Doug and I and Dave, we decided that it was a story that needed to be told.
Yeah, and I'm glad you told it too. And for you, Mark, did during with research and working with Dave, did you ever contact the military or the Department of Defense? And if so, what kind of response did you receive?
Yeah, well, so the feature doc that we're working on now, which is related to the short doc we made, The Invisible Enemy, we have individuals that we are contacting from both areas, and we did speak with people that served with Dave, and as you see, there's several interviews that we include in the film, and we do think it's important to tell the entirety of the story. At this point, we haven't heard back from you know outreach that we'd made, but for the feature doc that we're working on now, that will definitely be a part of it.
Okay, now, Dave, how many military personnel have died who have worked at the NTTR?
Friday, I added the name of one of the other cops that was up there, and we're up to 459 that we know of. That's not all that's died, but I started a list in June of 23, and that's how many we've found out about so far or that have died, that we know of since I started the list. So it's growing, and
Do you
it's
keep a
bad.
list? Okay, so you keep the list, but do you keep a list of what they died from to see about the link to NTTR?
No, I didn't in the beginning, but I'm starting to now. The most common cause of death is cancers. The other things that we find that are common are neurological type disorders, the Parkinson's type thing, uh, the cancers, sudden heart attacks with no known health reasons, strokes, no known health reasons, uh, various things, lung problems. Lung problems are super common. Uh, so I really wasn't starting. And the first question I really started to ask if there was an issue was, how old were they? And I was researching trying to figure out how old they were, because we all know that just as life begins, it's going to end. Is what we're experiencing any different than what was normal? And the average age that I've been able to figure out so far is about 65 years old for
Well,
the folks on our list. The youngest that I know of was 33. That was my OJT supervisor, actually.
yeah, because I
And
know that in the documentary, there's a mention of two women that died in their 50s who had worked there. Were they military personnel or were they, let's say, secretaries that worked at the NTTR?
No, they were contract DoD contractors. Women that were military have passed as well. Many of the women that I have talked to that served up there have had really significant issues. Most common issues outside of cancers, even though some are cancers, are with female stuff. And one lady that I've talked to has had stage 4 cancer 4 times for female related issues since she's been up there. I mean, it's not, it's tragic. I mean, I have, if you saw in the film, there was a guy, Al Moreno, and Al was my first roommate in the military when I got to Vegas. And he suffers horribly from his Parkinson's disease. It's really, it's really terrible to see how it's changed his life. And, many of the guys, a brain tumor, there's one type of brain tumor that several of our folks have gotten that, like one of the guys that was a cop again with me, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor in November and died in February. It was 3 months. My chief died. Our chief master sergeant for the cops died of a brain tumor. And that was I think his 3rd bout with cancer.
Wow. Well, Mark, what in the world goes through your mind as you were putting this whole film together?
It's such a good question. First off, you mentioned being thankful for Dave's service, and we're thankful to be Americans. I didn't serve, but the folks that did serve honorably, it was our vision that they needed to be taken care of. We were surprised by the fact that Department of Energy folks who work basically side by side with a lot of Department of Defense folks could receive a lot of funding because their work apparently was not deemed classified. So we felt like people they're working in the same area, and yet the same benefits aren't passed down accordingly. Every one of the individuals that we interviewed said that they would do it again, knowing what they know now, because their service was that important to them, and they are true patriots. And so it was important for us as we were surprised with what was going on. We want things to be exposed for what had happened, but we also want to lean on the inspiration of what Dave is doing with the Invisible Enemy, with his organization, which is really trying to make a change. And I'm, again, I was taken aback by everything that I had heard and with every one of the interviews. But the most important thing that I took away from this was, as Americans, it's our duty to speak out when things aren't right. And I am so inspired by activism when it comes from Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're voting, what side of the vote the aisle. It's about the power of activism and the power of making change in Congress. So our story is about exposing what's happened. It's not a story; it's a truth. And our hope is that as we begin, as people begin to understand what happened, that some significant change can actually happen in Congress. That's what Dave is working on, and that's what we're hoping to highlight in the larger film.
When you started working on the short film, there's got to be so much information. Was it difficult to figure out how to put certain information together for the short film? Because this could have been a complete full-blown docu-series.
Yes, and actually, to that point, we have a significant amount of footage that we're shooting now, including trips around the perimeter of the test site and other interviews and reactions. We've been to several cities around the country that we've been shooting in, and yeah, again, I want people to be educated on what's happened and everything. But the important thing is the next steps is the inspiration of making change and righting a wrong. Because the other thing to think about is Dave is not just fighting for himself and for the folks that he served with, but for their families. Because as you mentioned, when you worked at the test site and you're bringing things home, we found out that there was a larger percentage of people that were even people that were doing laundry for the gentlemen that had come back, or the women that were coming back, now have forms of cancer. That was one of the women that we interviewed in the short film. She talked about doing the laundry of her parents and grandparents, and now she and her husband are battling things that are known to be possible from exposure to radiation. So it really exists, and we're talking about the now, but also the future. This is what we do as Americans. We take care of those who take care of us.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And Dave, for you, when you work there, or if anybody who works there, um, are they told or given any warning that there could be detriment to their own health?
No, no, and that's when there comes a point that you go from learning and trying to gain an understanding of what has happened. Then there was the point where you found out they knew that the government knew this was going to happen to us, and they essentially came out. They put in writing that the juice was worth the squeeze. None of us knew when we were up there, and it wasn't. None of the ranks knew. I mean, for me as a little airman that the nobody on the site that gets a cruddy job, to the commanders, the full bird colonels. We're all as sick. We're all just as dying. We all have the same exact impacts, and nobody knew. We just and Mark was with us. We just spent a weekend with my old commander, with the commander of the cops, and he talked about how he had absolutely no idea of what we were being exposed to when we were up there, and he's now had cancer twice. He says his cancer isn't related. I don't know how you would know one way or the other based on everything that I've seen, but he's gone through the same things that everybody else has. And the other thing that's pretty amazing too, that I think makes it a little bit of a struggle, is not everybody has the same thing, but it's the rate at which those of us that served up there have something. And this isn't a runny nose something. These are really, any single thing on its own is tragic. And it's just, for example, we have a closed Facebook group. We have a public Facebook group. On the closed Facebook group, one of them put a note to me. One of the guys put a note to me about a week ago. Goes, "Hey, Dave, add liver cancer to my list now." And it's like, that by itself for anybody is a tragic diagnosis. I mean, that is a life altering, could be life shortening. That's a big deal. And it was, add this to my list now.
Yeah, I have a doctorate in health. And when I watched this documentary, I started thinking, and you're bringing it up where some of the men and women have had cancer more than once, more than twice. And if you're exposed to radiation and it's caused a form of cancer, most oncologists never put the link together, and then they sit there and think that they can treat that cancer with radiation when it was the very thing that actually caused the cancer. Those that have cancer multiple times, sometimes they call it secondary cancer because the treatment from the first cancer causes the second round of cancer, but the doctors classify it as a separate case. So it gets very confusing. But I had a thought. You were there from 83 to 89. Have you ever done I'm literally picturing in my mind that somebody needs to create a crime scene board with a bunch of red lines connecting the dots here, because with all of the people that have worked at the training range, when they left, how many years passed till they got diagnosed with cancer? To me, it's almost a link.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why you don't suspect. Like, I didn't suspect. I had the big tumor removed about 20 years ago, about 2005. No part of me suspected that might have had something to do with what I was doing in 1984, 85, 86. You don't put that link. You're 20 years post. And the manifestation of the issues that most of us have is 20 to 30 years post our time up range. And as we all talk, we don't think that in our 50s, or like my case, I just turned 60 a couple weeks ago. You don't think that what you did at 19 years old is what's causing your health problem at 60. You don't put those two together until you talk to everybody that you were hanging out with that was all 20 years old or 19 years, whatever we were. And everybody goes, "I got a tumor, I got a tumor, I got a tumor." I've got cancer. I've got, this, like I said, lung problems are common. And then as we start, as all of us have continued to age, the list of things, it just grows and grows. A year ago, when we started shooting the documentary, I had lung problems. I talk about that in the video. And now the list has been added to so much that if it was anybody else, I'd be like, oh my God. But the list is long. And none of it, I mean, just as an example, I have left brain atrophy. I wouldn't want you hear that from somebody, and brain cysts and tumor in my lungs, tumors on my thyroids, all these different issues. And for us anymore, it's just one more thing on the list, because
That
it's
is, it is so heartbreaking. And for you, Mark, how many people did you interview for the documentary, and how many more did you interview that are not in the documentary? Because I'm sure every story is shocking.
Yeah, for the short documentary for the Invisible Enemy, we probably interviewed 10, well, maybe 10 to 15, or maybe a few more. We couldn't include everyone, just based on time. And you're right, it was shocking, and we could have made this into a longer film, which was, again, our intention was to create the short first, and that's why we're shooting the longer film. And I think there'll be some more, obviously interesting things that we're finding out. But we were hearing the common stories that Dave had talked about were common to a lot of the guys and women. And for us, it was important that we get the truth out there. People, they can understand it. You talked about there's, that you want to create a crime scene there. Well, the crime scene is still, it's still there, and people are still working there. There are still people that are serving at the Nevada test site, not only in Las Vegas, near Las Vegas, but also up north. The bases are, they restrict the area. They're not testing nuclear weapons, but they are doing exercises, and they're doing, there are scientists and others that are up there, and I assume military personnel. So you're right. We probably should sound the alarm on what's going on, but this is, potentially, if these people are there now, knock on wood that things don't happen down the road, because we know the half-lives are quite long. So I think another thing to note from our interviews was, I mentioned before that every person that we talked to had said that they would do it again. Again, they're true Americans, true patriots, but also that they're very loyal to each other, and there's a loyalty even to the government now. They're not going to go. They're not going to. There are certain things Dave can't talk to me about, and I'm not going to press him on those things. What I want to make sure is that this truth is out there, people understand what's going on, and we get real change made in Congress. And Dave he can talk to you a little bit more about that, what they're working on. But that's going to be our inspiring angle for this story. That at the end of the day, benefits will be achieved. There will be benefits for Dave's folks, as well as the generations of people that the radiation has it's a terrible thing, and obviously, as we know, but we want to make sure that people and families are covered.
The thing that I couldn't wrap my head around in this documentary is how the military and the Department of Defense denied health benefits. And they use the excuse, because it's a top secret classified location of their duty, basically saying they never worked there. And I'm like, if you're working in a top secret area, they can always classify you as to working somewhere else and still allow you to get benefits. Dave, why did they deny the benefits?
So, compound issue. The simplest way to describe it is, there isn't there, therefore we weren't there, therefore we weren't exposed. So when I go to the VA and I say I have a brain cyst and I want to file a claim because I believe it's related to my plutonium exposure, The VA then has to call the Department of Defense to verify duty location and to verify exposure. The VA can't on its own say, yeah, we know that happened, because in fact they don't. They only know what we tell them as veterans. So the DOD would rather, first, me to shut up, and second, to keep the places that they have that are secrets a secret. They have been known, that they have been talked about even by presidents, but they would just as soon that not happen, number one. And number two, they have to verify the exposure. So when they verify the exposure, then they have to admit that they're still sending people to places of known toxins, and these people are going to go through the same thing that I am today, and that the folks I worked with, and that those issues will manifest themselves in today's cadre that's up there 20, 30 years from now. And just simply as an employer, I don't think any employer wants to say, oh yeah, we're sending you somewhere that's going to make you sick. And Mark brought it up. What we did was important. It made an enormous difference that, quite frankly, people will never know or understand. On these things that we did made history, or prevented a history, if you will. And we're proud of that.
Yeah. And you ought to be proud of it too, because things, like Mark said, things that you've never told him, and he's not going to ask. I'm not going to ask because there's a reason why things are classified, and we have to protect our country. So we don't go around blabbing that type of information, because nowadays everybody's listening. Do you feel like a whistleblower?
No, not necessarily. I do find it amazing that nobody else has done what I've done. And I left there, like I said, a long time ago. I left there in 87. But we didn't know. It took a long time to manifest itself. There were people that worked out on the range long before my day out on the range. But yeah, nobody's ever done anything. But I have my opinion. I have a set of life experiences. I've been involved in politics for a long time. I understand the legislative process and how it works. And I was the guy that decided to sit down and who avoided college, or not avoided college. I have my degrees, but I avoided science at all costs. Economics courses, great elective. Science courses, I'm out. And now I've had to learn about these things. And so with the knowledge that I gained and the experiences that I've had, I knew how to put a plan in place to do what we're doing now with lobbying Congress. Not lobbying, we're not lobbyists, we're activists, right? We're advocating. But to put something together to help people, because it's the folks I worked with that are sick and dying, but it's also our kids have problems, birth defects and things like that, all related. All of my children have things related, all four. Our wives, like my wife, had 3 miscarriages. Very common thing that the wives all went through because of the way it changed the male reproductive system. It caused miscarriages. And them knowing that was going to happen, admitting that they knew they were creating a liability long before I ever went up, before any of us that worked at my location went up, because it wasn't even there yet. It hadn't been built. Somebody has to stand up and say something, and I knew how to do it. I'm not saying I'm a pro, but I knew what had to be done. And so to me, the crime would have been not to say something, go, yeah, I know what happened. I know how to fix it, but I'm going to sit here and shut up because I'm selfish. And that's not me.
Yeah. Are the people in DC listening?
They do. It's very, it takes a lot of time. That's one of the purposes for the movie. But the one universal thing that we find is every time somebody listens to me or watches the movie, they're shocked because it's not. Mark and Doug did a great job in doing what I wanted done, and that is I want an emotional response. I want somebody to feel a little bit of what it is. To think about what is it? Is my life expectancy really 65 years instead of 70 something for somebody else? Am I at risk of getting a brain tumor that I know killed my buddy in 3 months? And the purpose of the bill is just simply to say, get them to say, and they don't have to say exactly where we were, and it's not important. There's this area the size of Rhode Island that we were in that area, that yes, we were exposed, so that the VA can then provide the benefits that if we were anywhere else, we would be entitled to. And then more importantly, when it's service connected, it provides a survivor benefit. Today, if I died as a result of something related to my exposure, my wife's left out to dry, even though it's as service connected as a bullet. There's nothing for her. And this is what's happened to all the widows and widowers and the children of people that were stationed up there. They were left high and dry because that's easier and more convenient for some in government than it is to say, you know what? We knew what was going to happen. It happened. We knew it was going to create a future liability. Now we gotta step up. We're not asking. I got asked we were in a congressional office this morning, and they said, "Are you trying to get back pay?" I said, "We're not trying to get back pay. We're simply trying to get the benefits that as a veteran, the government promised we'd be entitled to." Crazy.
Yeah, that's what made this, when I watched the documentary, it was shocking, it's powerful, compelling, heartbreaking, and it makes you angry.
Yeah.
And so, yes, this film creates a very powerful emotional response. Now, Mark, has this film been shown at a film festival yet? And if so, what's been the audience's reaction?
Yeah, we've screened at 5 festivals so far, and we opened at Cordillera in Nevada and Woodstock in New York. And we also were in Santa Fe, where we've got the Best Doc Short Award. And the reaction has been astounding, astonishing in a lot of ways. And we're going from, some cities that are more progressive, places like Santa Fe, and then in Woodstock and places like that where people had no idea what was going on. And I love that we could make some noise in some of those communities where this is a really powerful film. And during the Q&As, they often spill into the vestibule of the theater because after the Q&A goes, it's just Dave is taking questions for so long, and I really want people to see this in theaters. I can't say that enough. I know that we're submitting to, we have probably 10 to 12 more festivals that we're submitting to. And I'm hoping that the programmers are watching it on a big screen somehow, because the feeling you get when you see it, it's fine, to watch it on your iPad or a computer. But when you're surrounded by the vast, the stories of people and the environment and what's happened, it's that much more powerful. So your question was, what was the reaction? We've had people that are as astonished as you are. They're surprised that it's happened, that there hasn't been any sort of acknowledgement from the government. And I think, they want to make change. We're in a time where we can make change. This is not I mentioned before, this is not a political affiliation issue. It's an issue of truth. And we are Americans, capital A, right? We do what's right. We take care of those who take care of us. And
it's a humanitarian effort here. This is about humanity. This is about, being fair, as well as the military being responsible. And I understand how government can be. They don't want to take blame for anything. And if they say, yeah, that really happened, they're looking at a picture that may not actually happen. But I look at it as fair, These men and women served our country, served it proudly, as you put it, and they need to get their benefits for themselves as well as their family, because when you watch the documentary, and both of you already know this, but I'm talking to my viewers and listeners here, when you watch the documentary, you understand that it's not just those who serve there, it's their families that even have DNA mutations that end up causing a condition. And like you said, Dave, it wreaked havoc. And I noticed this. It wreaked havoc on the male reproductive system, because if a man worked there and doesn't show any signs, but their kid does. So it shows that there is a genetic situation here, and somebody needs to pay up, and somebody needs to do the right thing. Now, have either one of you been in contact or tried to be in contact with President Trump as well as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth?
We're trying, but when you're one of 330 million, it's a lot of work trying to amplify our voice. But we're trying, and that's part of what we're doing here. You asked a question, and Mark answered it, but I want to say something. What was the reaction? This is our life. We live this every day. My wife has questioned, why do you think it's that big a deal? And I always have when I figured out the issue. When we went to the Cordillera Film Festival in Reno, another one of my board members went with me to this, and we sat in it. This is the first screening, first time anybody's ever seen it. And people were crying. You saw them, they were either pissed off or they were in tears. And that's when I knew that what's normal for us isn't normal, and that it was our everyday life, and others just in Reno, which is in Nevada, and these people had no idea. No idea.
Oh, I could imagine. Yeah, I could imagine the citizens of Nevada who did not know that now know. I can't even imagine the emotion they're going through, and half of that's got to be anger.
Yeah. As weird as it may sound, I hope it does. I hope it does make them angry. I hope it does piss them off, because in the end, the greatest thing that could come from all this is that the government doesn't do it again.
That's exactly right. Now, for both of you, what can the general public do to help bring awareness to this atrocity?
One, watch the video when they can. We have a website. It's www.theinvisiblenemy.org. They can go on there and click donate, because democracy works, but it didn't cheat. We're learning. DC is one expensive city, and I have to spend a lot of time here. The other thing is, and this is free, call your congressman's office, ask to speak to somebody, and ask them to support us. The bill is HR 1400, but just ask them to support us, because we're here asking in person. There's 435 congressmen. There's 435 offices. That's a whole lot of in person, but if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do. But if congressmen hear from their constituents to say, hey, I just found out this is going on, it's no bueno. We need to do something. That's the greatest things that we could ask for.
Yeah, amen to that. And look, ladies and gentlemen, The Invisible Enemy is a documentary short film by Douglas Brian Miller and Mark Shapiro, which exposes the dangers, the denials, the injustice, and the tragic consequences endured by the men and women who served proudly at the Nevada Test and Training Range. Now, the film includes interviews with Dave Crete, who is here with us today, and others who have worked at the NTTR. And this film is powerful, it's compelling, it's heartbreaking, and should make you angry, all at the same time. Now, Dave Crete created the Invisible Enemy Foundation and is working with Congress to pass legislation that officially recognizes the veterans exposed to dangerous radiation and chemicals while serving at the Nevada Test and Training Range. And as he said, HR 1400 is a new bill that could pave the way for victims and their families to receive comprehensive medical care and fair financial compensation. Now, I want to thank you, Dave, first and again for your service to our country and the work that you are doing to help those who have been exposed to radiation and chemicals at the NTTR. And many thanks to you, Mark, for bringing this story to the forefront to give all of those we've lost and who are still here, giving them a voice through this very, again, powerful and compelling film, The Invisible Enemy. And I want to thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing our story and helping us.
Well, we really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and I plan on doing more than that. So, but ladies and gentlemen, when you have the chance, now go to theinvisiblenemy.org. Please donate. As Dave said, DC's expensive, and when you are becoming the voice for many other people to make things right, well, it takes money to do that. So go to theinvisiblenemy.org, make the donation, do your part. And we have got to salute every man and every woman who's ever served in the military. My father served in the military, and we need to thank them for their service. And some of them, like Dave and others, well, they've worked at facilities. Well, they can't tell us the secrets. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes to keep our country safe and powerful all at the same time. So again, go to theinvisiblenemy.org. And I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching and listening. And as for me, you're either going to see me at the movies or from the red carpet.